a good afternoon, and how nice it is to see such a wonderful turnout. As Stephen said, my name is David Hastings, and my wife and I have lived in Salhouse for 54 years. And we came here because we wanted to live in a Broadland village, not in the city, and we wanted our children to come and enjoy a Broadland village. In those 17 years, as some of you know, I had the privilege of being your district councillor for 17 years, including, as I say, 4 years as leader of Broadland, 2 years as vice chairman, and then 2 years finance chairman. So perhaps you'll let me share some of my views and fears now from that angle, having served there for 17 years, as to what's happening in Broadland today, because I think it is vital we all understand it. In my interview with the late Edward Trafford, when I was interviewed to see if I was a businessman suitable to be a district councillor, he spelled out my task very clearly. I had one job, and that was to represent all the residents in my ward and my 3 parish councils, and then after that at the district council. But my first job was to my ward, and I think that is something which, sad to say, has changed, because we've now seen the change. We now have one of our councillors, sadly, who no longer represents us. He speaks for his political masters, and that, I think, is a tragedy. We had a meeting only last year, a very important meeting, which he attended and I attended, when 5 of our parish councils lodged a formal protest against the eco-town. Would you believe it? In the evening of that meeting, nobody mentioned that 5 parish councils had lodged a protest. And our local member, they were his ward, he never mentioned it. Instead of that, he spoke for and voted in favour of the eco-proposal, which is worrying. I think the other big change you must wake up to, if you will, is in my day, it was a member-led authority. The elected members led the authority, and the officers served and worked for the members and the residents of Broadland. These days, sad to say, we've changed. It's now an officer-led authority. They do the running, and as we're seeing, as you'll see with some of the awful details, in Broadland, sad to say, the planners are now running wild. And they are making every effort, it seems, to find as much of our valuable farmland as they can for all the developers who wish to come and ruin Broadland. Don't forget, they've identified already 4,600 acres of food-producing land within our Northwest Triangle. And that's us, 4,600 acres. And the high density that we're now looking at, proposed by the developer, if it went ahead with the small gardens and allowing for the roads, that could be up to 78,000 houses. It's frightening. Whereas Norfolk's allocation up to 2026 is only 37,000. Why is it too, are they not listening to the scientists? We all went to the John Innes, and we've been several times, but last week was a major one, when the scientists said the politicians and the planners have got to wake up, and wake up fast, because by 2020 our need for food will double. You cannot afford to waste another square foot of farmland, and also in Broadland, don't forget, you have a very serious water problem. Water shortage, water, as I say, for the food and for everything else. But to say, they don't listen, and that is one of my worrying points. The other thing I suppose that's changed that worries me is there's a very cosy relationship now between the planners and the developers. Something in my day that would have been frowned on. In fact, it could have been illegal. Our chief planner at Broadland last year was the president of the planners' organisation. At the annual dinner, who was his guest of honour? Paul Knowles, the developer for Rackheath Ecotown. At the second, as I say, of our, and possibly you haven't heard about these, but Broadland is providing very lavish propaganda meetings. And the second one, the first one was held at Broad House, the second one was held at Sprowston Manor. Drinks and free lunch, all paid for by you and me, the taxpayer, and I never gave them the mandate for that. But it was interesting, in this second meeting, they learned from the first, because we weren't allowed any question time. Each table was allowed 1 minute to answer questions posed by the district council, not our questions, and each table had a facilitator who was going to stand up and report what we'd said. Unbelievably, we found all our facilitators were employees of Broadland District Council. And when the last table stood up, I couldn't believe it. The facilitator was Paul Knowles, the eco-town developer. That to me is something terribly wrong. We also had another meeting, how wonderful your money had been spent on the thermal imaging survey to go green, to make us all go green. And they highlighted a big building in the middle of Rackheath, this industrial estate. This is the worst offender, the biggest heat loss. Unfortunately, that turned out to be my son's warehouse, which isn't heated anyway. We've never had the answer to that, but obviously that was a flawed survey and cost you and I thousands. I think the other thing, as I say, that, I'll leave that one. I was going to mention that on that other meeting, of course, when we looked at the list of the attendees, and say Paul Nell's name wasn't there. Small world, nor was mine. Mine was removed, and when I asked where was I going to sit, I was told I could stand at the back. I think the other big change, of course, in my day, we were controlled, our planners and the council, by the Norfolk County Surveyor. And that was a great thing to have, because you had a proper professional actually looking at everything. And at one of our original meetings, as I say, Ian Coursey came, and he was one of our best county surveyors I think we've had. And I'll pass on to you his comments, because I think they're very apt. As he said, in my day, the Eco-Town and the Norfolk Hub would never have got past my desk, because they do not have the infrastructure, and they are destroying the quality of life and the character of this part of Broadland. I just wish we got more planners of his morals and quality today, but we haven't. I wonder how many of you know that a Rackheath pensioner last year was frightened into selling her house by the planners. She was told this was the only offer she was going to get, it was the best one, and they were starting work on the NDR right outside her front door last October. So the poor elderly lady sold. Sad. Is that democracy? I suggest you no. And now, what about the Eco-Town? Quickly on democracy. Excuse me. First we were told it was RAF Culture, and that ticked all the government boxes. Then, of course, thanks to local opposition and the fact that the planners woke up that they didn't have the infrastructure, as they don't have here, but that suddenly vanished. And then without any warning, as you know, we suddenly learned Rackheath now ticks all the government boxes. How did that happen? I have an awful feeling somebody put the name of Rackheath up to the government. Anyway, it's puzzling when you hear they say they tick all the government boxes, and yet Gordon Brown, to be fair, clearly stated that his dream of eco-towns were to be built on disused industrial brownfield sites, not on valuable farmland. Then can you remember that first public meeting we had at Rackheath, when the council suddenly realised, I think, that we as residents were starting to get angry. And if you remember, they made two promises that night, and the first one was no infrastructure, no eco-town. And the second one was, if there's strong local opposition, we will not go ahead. How hollow are those promises now? Originally we were told, if you remember, 3,400 houses. Then it went to 4.2, then it went to 5.1, which of course we discovered was the minimum figure anyway for a government eco-town. But recently, of course, on local radio, we've had a leading councillor say that by 2020, Rackheath will have to accept 15,000 houses. It's frightening.